He was considered the wealthiest American of all time and a self-made billionaire. By age 25, he controlled one of the largest oil refineries in the nation. By age 31, he had become the world's largest oil refiner. By age 38, he controlled 90% of the oil refined in the US. By the time of his retirement at age 58, he was the richest man in the country. By the time he died, he had become the richest man in the world. He's none other than the American oil tycoon, John D. Rockefeller. The way Rockefeller gained dominance in the oil industry and amassed his wealth has long been the subject of debate. To his critics, Rockefeller was a ruthless and greedy capitalist who unfairly crushed his competition and created a malevolent monopoly. Many considered him as someone who embodied the ideal of the self-made man, stabilized a volatile oil industry, created jobs, brought down the price of oil, and became history's greatest philanthropist. He was considered a business genius because he never had a year where he didn't make a profit, flourishing even in the time of recessions. Rockefeller's most striking quality was his frightening self-control. He relentlessly honed his will, training himself to be master of his emotions, desires, and schedule so that he could direct all his impulses towards his aims. Rockefeller understood that if you wish to be a boss, you have to learn how to boss yourself. Believing there was strength in silence, Rockefeller listened far more than he talked in his board meetings with the men at the top of his firm. And this air of almost supernatural calm only heightened his influence in the boardroom. The quieter Rockefeller was, the more forceful his presence seemed, and he played on his mystique as the resident genius immune to petty concerns. Even when his associates engaged in heated debate, Rockefeller maintained his composure. One associate recalled, "I have seen board meetings when excited men shouted profanity and made menacing gestures, but Mr. Rockefeller, maintaining the utmost courtesy, continued to dominate the room." When dealing with adversaries, Rockefeller's reserve worked to upset their balance. His long silences while negotiating deals often threw members of the other party off their game, tying them up in self-defeating knots. Virtually immune to intimidation, he answered the questions of hostile interrogators in a slow, cool, dignified way that frustrated their purposes. An angry contractor once stormed into Rockefeller's office and threw an angry tirade at him. Rockefeller sat with back turned, hunched over a writing desk until the tongue-lashing ran its course. Then he spun around in his swivel chair, faced the contractor and coolly asked, "I didn't catch what you were saying. Would you mind repeating that?" Rockefeller's upbringing was not an easy ride. His mother was solid, very religious, and very disciplined woman. She taught Rockefeller to work, to save, and to give to charities. His father was a salesman who was gone for weeks, even months at a time. The Rockefellers had enough money to get by on, but their finances were uncertain, dependent on when Rockefeller's father would show up and how much money he would bring upon his return. Young John Rockefeller grew up helping work the family farm and tending to his younger siblings. In school, Rockefeller was considered dim-witted and slow at his studies. One of his classmates recalled, "I have no recollection of John excelling at anything. There was nothing about him to make anybody pay special attention to him or speculate about his future. But I do remember he worked hard at everything, not talking much, and studying with great attention." Rockefeller went about his schoolwork with patient persistence. While he wasn't brilliant, he was reliable. Rockefeller said, "I was not an easy student, and I had to apply myself diligently to prepare my lessons." While Rockefeller was an average student, he excelled at mental arithmetic and was able to solve difficult arithmetic problems in his head, a talent that would be very useful to him throughout his business career. By the age of 12, he had saved over $50 from working for neighbors and raising some turkeys for his mother. At the urging of his mother, he loaned the $50 to a local farmer at 7% interest payable in 1 year. When the farmer paid him back with interest the next year, Rockefeller was impressed and said of it in 1904, "The impression was gaining ground with me that it was a good thing to let the money be my servant and not make myself a slave to the money." Rockefeller dropped out of high school and enrolled in a 3-month business course at a commercial college. Here he learned the basics of bookkeeping, penmanship, banking, commercial history, mercantile customs, and exchange. From his father, he had learned how to draw up notes and other business papers. His father was very meticulous in matters of business, and believed in the sacredness of contracts. At age 16, to become an autonomous and self-reliant young man, Rockefeller left his rural home in Ohio and began looking for work in Cleveland as a bookkeeper or clerk. Rockefeller attacked this goal with the same patient persistence he had applied to his schoolwork. Business was bad in Cleveland at the time, and Rockefeller had problems finding a job. Wanting to find a position with a large and reputable establishment in which he'd have the greatest opportunities for learning and advancement, he made a list of the merchants, banks, and railroads with the highest ratings. Each day, Rockefeller put on a dark suit, shaved, shined his shoes, and visited those companies. At each firm, he asked to speak to the top man, who was usually unavailable, then got straight to the point with their assistant and said, "I understand bookkeeping, and I'd like to get work." Rockefeller remembered business was bad in Cleveland at the time, and he had problems finding a job. Rockefeller said the job market was tight and the response was not encouraging. No one wanted a boy, and very few showed any overwhelming anxiety to talk with me on the subject of employment. Yet young John Rockefeller was not at all discouraged. A return to his home and to dependence was unthinkable. When he had gone through his whole list of companies without a job offer, he simply started at the top and visited every establishment again, sometimes dropping into the same business 3 times the same week. He treated his job search just like his job. Rockefeller said, "I was working every day at my business, the business of looking for work. I put in my full time at this every day." Finally, on September 26, 1855, he heard the words he'd been waiting for. "We'll give you a chance." A small firm, Hewitt and Tuttle, was in urgent need of an assistant bookkeeper and told Rockefeller to take off his coat and get to work right away. Rockefeller always referred to this date as Job Day and celebrated its anniversary with more gusto than his own birthday. As a boy, Rockefeller had a bit of a temper. Upon meeting an adult Rockefeller, though, one would have never known it. Adult Rockefeller was extremely reserved, always keeping to himself and listening more than he spoke. Rockefeller was an extremely detail-oriented man. His appearance was always kept impeccable. He was tenaciously punctual, and he stuck to a very strict schedule. Before writing letters to his secretaries, he would write 5 to 6 drafts with a hawk eye, and when signing letters, he did so with master artistry. When his wealth steadily climbed to record-breaking levels, he made a conscious effort to exercise modesty. Rockefeller would visit his oil fields, genuinely inquiring with supervisors on their views and opinions on how the company could be improved. He also spoke to the men that were actually doing the drilling. He took notes from these visits in a pocketbook and earned the nickname the Sponge.